Hey everyone, it's Sue from the Marion Library, and I have a lot of books to talk about today. It's a wide variety. We've got prehistoric sharks, we have the flu pandemic of 1918, we have magical realism in Alabama. We've got all sorts of really cool books here. So I'm going to start with some fiction first. And first of all, for those who love to read maybe short stories and love fantasy and science fiction, we have the Big Book of Modern Fantasy. And there's 91 stories in here. It's a pretty big tome, and it is from 22 different countries are represented in here, and there is stuff in here from Michael Moorcock to Angela Carter, Terry Pratchett, Stephen King, Ursula Le Guin, all sorts of great short stories in here. So if you maybe are a fan of science fiction fantasy and you want to try some short stories, or if you want to dip your toe into science fiction and fantasy, this would be a good book to try because it's full of short stories. So and you get a wide variety. So this is brand new, the Big Book of Modern Fantasy. Then we have Eric Van Lustbader, and he has a new book called the Nemesis Manifesto, and this is the first in a new series. And the main character's name is Evan Ryder, and she is a field agent for the Department of Defense for, of course, a secret arm of the Department of the Defense. And she finds out that a lot of her fellow agents are slowly being eliminated and killed. And of course, she's on the list. So she has to try and figure out who's trying to do this and why. Whoever's trying to do it is trying to bring down the United States. And it has branches all over the world. So this is a new series by Eric Van Lustbader called the Nemesis Manifesto. Okay, so I talked about sharks, and it is Shark Week or Shark Month going on right now, so why not have a new Meg novel? This is by Steve Alten. This is Meg Generations, and as you can see, it's a really big shark, and it's a really tiny little machine here in the water, so not good for the people who are in this machine. But this is about a megalodon shark. And apparently there is another shark of a giant size that is being transported at the same time. And these two sharks are going to meet, and they are going to fight it out in the oceans. So if you like Steve Alten, you know he's written quite a few books in the Meg series. So this is the latest. So if you want something that kind of makes you not want to go swimming, read this Meg book. This is Meg Generations by Steve Alten. I don't need to read that book to not want to go swimming in the ocean. So, South of the Buttonwood Tree by Heather Weber. I read this book and I absolutely adored it. She has written a lot of other books, but she's kind of hit her stride with her last two books. She's the author of Midnight at the Blackbird Cafe that came out last year. So if you like this book, you want to read that book. They're standalone, so you don't need to read one in order to read the other. But South of the Buttonwood Tree is magical realism. Takes place in Alabama in a small town called Buttonwood. And main character's name is Blue Bishop. And she is the last of her family. Well, actually, she does have a sister, a younger sister, but Blue has seen a lot of tragedy in her family. Her parents and all of her brothers have been died or been killed. Her two brothers infamously in a car accident after they robbed the bank in Buttonwood. This was many years ago, but in Buttonwood, memory is long, and people think that the bishops were not good people, and so they think that Blue is not the best either. But Blue is a children's book artist, and she's quite successful at it, and she wants more than anything to be able to adopt a child. So she's been working really hard to save the money to adopt a child. And just when this looks like it might start to be able to happen for her, she visits the Buttonwood tree, which is this famous tree in the woods. where you can ask it a question and the Buttonwood tree will respond with an answer with a tiny little button it spits out that's made from the tree, and there's one sentence on it that tells you what you want to know. Now, if you ask the tree and you don't take its advice, then you're in for a string of really bad luck. So you have to really be thoughtful about when you go to the tree, and you can only go to the tree once a year. So Blue is at the tree and she finds a baby that is left there. And in the folds of the baby's blanket is a little button that says, "Give the baby to Blue Bishop." So Blue has this baby, this little girl, she names her Flora, and she's immediately in love with this child. But of course, now there's a mystery about who left the baby. The baby's brand new, it's only a few days old. Who left the baby and why? And of course, there are people in town who don't want Blue to have the baby. They don't think that the baby's in good hands with Blue. So there's stories going back and forth about people telling tales about Blue to the judge who's going to rule on whether or not Blue can adopt this child. But there are also people who love Blue and know that she really is a sweet and gentle person. And they're also telling the judge stories about Blue and all the things that she's done over the years. So Blue is just one of the characters in this book. There are other characters who also have interesting little quirks about them, and they're all connected somehow, and I can't tell you how. There's some pretty good twists in here, but this is a really wonderful novel. If you like Sarah Addison Allen, if you like early Alice Hoffman novels where she wrote a lot about magical realism, you will absolutely adore South of the Buttonwood Tree. So give this one a try. Okay, so Hieroglyphs by Jill McCorkle. This is fiction, contemporary, and it is about a marriage. Two people who have retired, and they used to live in Boston. They retired to North Carolina, and Lil is the mother, and she decides that she wants to leave some kind of history for their children. So she starts going through all of their old letters and postcards, diary entries, and she's starting to find out a lot of stuff that she didn't know about before in their marriage and in their family. And Frank, her husband, becomes obsessed with this house that he grew up in that's not far from where they're living, and he keeps going over there and visiting the young single mother who is living there, and just wants to raise her kid. She doesn't want any trouble, but Frank is obsessed with this house for some reason. I don't know what. So really, this book, Hieroglyphics, is about family secrets and generational secrets and things that we don't tell our children, things that our parents didn't tell us, and how do you work through all of that, and how do you pass on to your children what you want to pass on to them. So Hieroglyphics by Jill McCorkle. Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. And I just started this today. This is historical fiction. It takes place in Dublin in 1918 in a maternity ward. It's right at the height of the Great Flu and World War I. And Ireland, of course, is in the middle of their rebellion against England. So they've got that on top of everything else. And the main character here, her name is Julia Powers. She's a nurse who works at the hospital. And she gets involved with two other people who show up at the hospital. One of them is Dr. Kathleen Lynn, and the other is a volunteer named Bridie Sweeney. So this is a novel about these three women and the women on the maternity ward. It takes place over, I believe, over 3 days. And this is getting rave reviews. So if you like historical fiction, give The Pull of the Stars a shot. She is the author of the book Room, if you are familiar with that book. It was made into a movie, but this is historical fiction. Alice Feeney has a new book called His and Hers. It's kind of a thriller. It's about two people, Anna and Jack Harper. And Anna is a news anchor with the BBC. Jack is a chief inspector. and they are both covering a story about a woman's murder. This is a story that could make Anna's career as a news anchor, and Jack Harper, of course, is suspicious because he knows that Anna knew this woman, and of course Anna knows that Jack knew this woman who was murdered. So he becomes a suspect in his own murder investigation. So it's really interesting because it's told in alternating chapters between the two characters, Anna and Jack, and one of them is not telling the truth. There's a great little saying here. It says, there are two sides to every story, yours and mine, ours and theirs, his and hers, which means someone is always lying. So this is like a good thriller, his and hers. Then I've got a couple mysteries. Lindsay Davis, The Grove of the Caesars. This is a Flavia Albiot mystery novel in that series. First century Rome. So if you want to read something a little bit different, a different mystery series, if you even like cozy mysteries and you want to try something a little bit different than a cozy mystery, this takes place in first century Rome. So if you like a little bit of history, this would be a good one to read. Of course, it's about a serial killer in ancient Rome. Lindsay Davis, The Grove of the Caesars. Give this one a try. Then we have The Devil's Bones by Carolyn Haynes. This is the latest in her Sarah Booth Delaney mystery, and this takes place over an Easter weekend. And of course, Sarah Booth Delaney has to solve another mystery, so the latest in that series. And then I finally have this book that's really interesting, and well, I'll just tell you, it's called Crossings, and it's by Alex Landrigan, and this is a book that you're going to need some patience with, and it's a great book for a challenge because this is a book that you can read a couple of different ways. So the premise of the book, first of all, is there's a bookbinder who is given a manuscript to bind, and he goes to deliver the finished book to the bibliophile who hired him to do it, and finds that she's been murdered, horribly murdered. He thinks that the murder has something to do with this book that the manuscript that he just bound. And the manuscript is called Crossings. So the manuscript itself and this story is 3 books in one. And they are The Education of a Monster, City of Ghosts, and Tales of the Albatross. Now here's where it gets interesting. So you can read this book in 2 different ways. You can read it from beginning to end, straight through, or you can read it following an alternative chapter sequence that offers a completely different reading experience. So that in itself has intrigued me. If you want to read a book that's going to challenge you a little bit, maybe you loved House of Leaves, that was out years ago, that had you reading all around and footnotes and flipping around. This isn't quite as complicated as that, but I think that it's going to be pretty interesting as a preface. And then as you start reading, you get to the end of the chapter, and if you see down here, it will tell you to go to a different page. So then you go to flip to that page, read there, and then follow it through. So you can either read it from beginning to end straight through, or you can read it this way, or you can do both. And I think it's going to be a fascinating book. I'm probably going to read this one just to see just how it goes, and I'm probably going to read it both ways to see what the differences are and how I picture the book from 2 different ways. So Crossings by Alex Landrigan. This is a little bit of a challenge, but I think it'll be a lot of fun. So that's all I have for some fiction, and I will be back with some more nonfiction and some teen stuff.